This conference will now be recorded.
So thanks everyone for joining. I guess the biggest announcement we do have today is the addition of Tanvir. Just wanted to say before we get started with the introductions, I didn't receive any requests to present today. So if there's anybody on the call that did have something they wanted to present, please let me know. There should be plenty of time for that. If not, what we'll be doing is next month, reaching out to a few people for some specific presentations. So we're looking forward to starting more regular presentations during our monthly meetings. And then Cliff, is there anything that you would like to announce for the larger OCP?
Sure. It's a couple of updates. One is we have selected a new executive director to replace, I guess, the acting role that Bill is holding now, and that person will start March the 1st. And I'm afraid I'm not in a position to say who it is today because they have signed, they have accepted, so it's a done deal, but they're notifying their employer now. So we'll be making an announcement shortly on that. Secondly, Bill Carter is going to be pulling back into an advisory role, and we will be looking for a full-time CTO to replace Bill. We should have an idea of the role description by mid-March because we want to wait for the new executive director to start. And then anybody that has any ideas about people that might be a good candidate should start to send it over once we publish that. And so that's definitely good news and progress on our side that we've. And I'm very confident when you hear the name of the person we hired, you'll be happy. It's a good hire, someone that has a lot of business acumen and strength.
Great, thank you, Cliff. And then just kind of a refresher for the overall 2022 calendar for OCP events. The summit in Prague, has that been rescheduled, or any update on the Prague summit?
Right. So the summit in Prague has been rescheduled to 2023, and so we do not have a replacement large event at this point. What we are looking to do is do more targeted events. So if this group, in conjunction with maybe another group, wanted to do a workshop, we could support that. There's also the possibility, Dirk and I are more active now in getting us space in a co-located event. So for example, at OFC, we've arranged to have a lunch and a roundtable discussion with a panel session led by Vlad Kozlov from Lake Counting. And we're, so to have the OCP present. So if there was a conference looking at edge computing or the work you're looking at doing, and you wanted to see if we could have a presence there and in some way, you should let us know. I will let you know that I have already, because of my past associations with the layer 1, 2, 3 conferences, have secured a speaking slot and a panel session at the conference that's going to be held in Madrid in, I believe it's late April. And so there might be some opportunity for discussing edge computing and the work in this group there. But if there, like I said, if there is a third-party event that this team would like support to have a presence at, let us know, and we can help you perhaps get that. We approach the conference organizers, see about getting a session, work with you to organize it, pull in an analyst if you need that.
Yeah, thank you, Cliff. And then Cliff, if you're able to stay on at the end of the call for a couple of minutes with Tanvir, we have been brainstorming some ideas for doing a workshop potentially at the Flex Milpita site somewhere around June, July. But obviously with COVID, we have to be careful what dates we set. But I think we could discuss options that we might be able to do with something like that. One of the reasons why that was attractive is if there really isn't going to be a large-scale regional summit before the global summit next fall,
Mhm.
I would say that kind of was a good showcase opportunity. But if you don't mind hanging on a few minutes at the end, that'd be great to just discuss that a bit.
Sure, I have a hard stop at 2, but anytime before that is great.
Okay. Okay, so without further ado, I'd like to introduce Tanvir to the team. I have a bio that you provided to me, Tanvir. I could read it for the group, but would you care to introduce yourself, or would you
Yeah,
prefer
yeah,
I
I
go?
can, I can, I can just do that. So let me just turn off my video. I don't know whether you can see me or I'm still. All right, here you
Great.
go. All right. So thanks a lot, Jim. And just to give some background of myself, so that you'll get an idea that why openness is important for me. So I'm Tanvir. I'm currently in a role in Nokia, leading edge cloud innovation and ecosystems. I'm actually trying to build a new tribe within the business line that we have for the edge cloud. So it means that we are focusing on this openness and innovation more, and that's why I'm excited, because I think that openness is part of like my DNA, and something that I would like to continue to have this journey with the OCP. At the same time, I have been in the industry for 22 plus years, lived in 4 continents, so pretty much in all continents have been traveling and living in my life. I'm based out of in Dallas in Texas now, but I have background in from mostly from the telco, hands-on kind of engineer climbing up towers, and then in with vendors like Ericsson as a service delivery architect, and then also I worked with the Intel in their 5G program back in 2013 to 15. So pretty much, at that time nobody was talking about 5G. And then a little bit of background again in Ericsson, worked for them and also worked for a startup. And before joining Nokia, I have worked with Open Networking Foundation, so Guru and the team. So I'm been very closely working with OCP in those days. So definitely something that I like to contribute, and hopefully within my limited capacity, I would like to make sure that we have a very much active community, and we make progress, and we actually move along with this edge cloud story that we have. And I think this is a very exciting area to work with. So happy to be part of the team.
Great. Thank you very much, Tanvir. Really looking forward to having you be such a key person on the team. And I think with your background, particularly with ONF and others, I think you have the broad base of skills that are really going to be helpful. I think for 2022, we recently were going back through some of the surveys that we had done last year, and there's great interest in, I guess, what I'll call the traditional telco service providers, as well as much larger collaboration with some of the web cloud providers as well. So there's really kind of a neat crossroads right now where I think there's going to be a lot of exciting things going forward in multiple directions. So yesterday I had a chance to discuss with one of the business directors for Google and some of the services that they're doing, and it's really quite an impressive array that they're looking at for vertical integration of services, as well as horizontal integration of multiple providers having contributions, whether it's security, all the way through to working with governments for having roadside edge deployments for autonomous vehicles. So I think we're really at an exciting time. And then this looks like a great year to be able to start addressing some of those multiple edge cases.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think, yeah, I mean, now, like, I mean, people are more talking about Edge Cloud. So it has been on the PowerPoint most of the time for last 2 or 3 years. So at least now people are seeing the value of Edge Cloud. So definitely this is the area we need to focus on. But yeah.
Okay, so again, just kind of a note for today. The content is a little bit light. We're having some opportunities for NVIDIA to present next month, so I think we'll have a really good presentation for that. Also had the commitment from the Google team that they'll put some resources together that would be able to help discuss their viewpoints with our group. So going forward, I think we're building up more of the content for our monthly meetings. Last few have been a little bit just more on the administrative side and not a whole lot more. So we're committed to increasing the content, also in kind of build up toward a potential workshop this year. I think over the next several months, if there are people that have ideas that would like to present in a workshop, going through and maybe just doing some abstracts of those within our monthly meetings could be a good opportunity to I guess get a preview of what that could be, as well as any input from the team if there's ways that we could help point that in specific directions. So if there are any ideas that you had been thinking about, please feel free. You can send them to me one-on-one or through the whole entire OCP mailing list that you have on the invites. But however you're most comfortable, we're really looking for some additional content and ideas, again, building up toward a potential workshop in the June-July timeframe.
Hey, Jim, maybe I could pipe up for a sec, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Would it be helpful to invite one or two industry analysts to speak to the group about some of the top use cases they're seeing as a way to seed ideas here? Anyhow, I'm just putting that out there as a potential. Could be a small slot in one of our meetings here. I know Stefan Terrell very well from Light Counting. He's very well known in the telecom space. Also, I work closely with Roy Chow. And the other area I wonder about is, does it make sense for this team to think a little bit about private wireless, 5G, and start to look at some use cases there, and maybe we can have them talk to the group about that. Anyhow, just some ideas about how we might bring some cross-pollination of ideas into the team, and I'd be happy to reach out and make those invites if the team wanted that.
Yeah, Cliff, that exactly. So when we hang on a few minutes after the end, I think those are some of the brain. So it's kind of more the brainstorming point right now, but absolutely, if we could, incorporate that into the workshop, I think that would be really attractive for people to attend and, I guess enjoy as well via webinar if we can pull all that together. But certainly, I think your contacts with the industry analysts, I think we could make a strong case for an outstanding workshop. Okay, so I guess in terms of, our next meeting will be the second Tuesday in March. At that point, I'm happy to announce we will have a speaker who will be making a presentation, so we'll have some additional content. Is there anybody on the call that would like to either bring up something that they're working on that would be relevant, or any other updates so that we could build toward next month's meeting?
Hey, Jim, I'm sorry, it's Craig. So did you cover the workshop in lieu of the European Summit?
Well, yes, we had started off, and Cliff gave us the update that the
Update on that?
Yeah,
Okay.
so the Prague regional summit is rescheduled for 2023. And then if you could hang on at the end, Craig, as well, I think we could, with Tanvir, yourself, and Cliff, we could go through that in a bit more detail. But yes, I would say, especially with the not conflicting with any other OCP regional events, it looks like that'll give us a good chance to pull this together for a workshop. So we can talk about timing as well as content But yes, I think that would be really great for our group. So it gives us a nice goal for 2022, and I think we could really put together a nice day of events.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay, well, why don't we do this? If there's anybody on the call that's interested in the topic of potential workshop for the June-July timeframe, again, this is a brainstorming session, so we're just pulling some ideas together. Feel free to stay on if you have some direct input that you would like to add. If you're not involved or just want to see what the finished product is, no problem. I think we'll open it up for one more round if anybody has questions or comments, and then we'll let people go who have other things to do, and then we'll do our sidebar on that topic. So any last comments? Okay, well then, if anybody is on the call that wants to drop off, we'll be switching to more of the brainstorming topic for the workshop. And thank you very much for joining.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you, Jim.
All right, bye, Rick. Bye, Mike. Okay, so Cliff, getting back to your idea, I've been working with Brandon from our Flex marketing team, and he was quite excited about, but I think one of his concerns about a workshop was if we conflict timing wise with some other regional event, that it might dilute how attended that would be. But if you had, I don't know if you've attended the previous session we had a couple of years ago in our Flex Milpitas facility.
No.
It's quite large, so I would say we could have a large attendance and comply with social distancing rules very easily. So I guess to kind of kick things off, one of the things that I was thinking is 5G/Edge is a big enough topic where we may not even have to work with other OCP subgroups to be able to have decent content. So one of the things that Craig and I had been talking about, and we just briefly discussed with Tanvir, is I think we could get some special presentations from not only the telcos, but also from the web service providers. So we could start to spread out some of the direction that we're looking. And then the idea for the industry analysts, I think, let me talk a little bit more with Brandon now that we have the green light that we won't conflict with any other OCP events. And then I know he has some ideas on that. And I guess some of the discussions that I would be having internally would be some of the sponsorship for those speakers. And, I guess, tipping a few cards. Does hosting a site do anything to contribute toward that? And if we could look for additional sponsors, but that type of discussion, I think, would be of interest to Brandon to, host and, all the things that go along with that. But from that standpoint, Craig, did you have any other specific items that you were thinking would make for a very effective workshop?
Yeah, I not in terms of the edge as much as just the telco in general. I think that we've got between the telco and edge projects, there would be enough content that we could probably generate for both, a full day's activity for ourselves, similar to our day of engineering workshops at the summit. And I think that I would like to do more. I don't really want to open it up for just a free for all, but I would like to have us do a small amount of vetting of the topics, so that we can ensure that we're following some OCP principles and not just having, a marketing free for all where there's a lot of things talked about that don't really generate work for our groups. Go ahead.
Yeah, I agree,
Well,
Craig, because I was thinking if we could vet some of those out during our monthly meetings, whether it's the telco meeting or the edge meeting, but have an idea where we get enough of an abstract so we know if it is going to be, that type of a infomercial versus something that could result in a project for OCP.
And
Right.
so one thing I would maybe put on the table as a couple of ideas is to perhaps sandwich the deeper technical sessions with a keynote, maybe looking at a market overview from an analyst, and then maybe that same analyst or a different analyst close the workshop with a panel session. So that way you kind of get market perspectives. You might have a panel session where we bring in, maybe even invite an enterprise around to talk about private wireless, or a telecom provider to talk about their use cases, and help stimulate some thinking would be one thing to think about. And then put the more engineering type discussions in the middle of the day, if you're going to look to fill a full day.
I like the idea of bringing the the analyst here, Cliff. So I think this gives some kind of connections that what we are doing, and showcasing the purpose, right? So why we are doing it, right? So that's a good idea. I think this would be good. Like, so it is not like 100% technical kind of workshop, rather than so making some kind of an interesting from the business perspective.
Mm-hmm. Exactly, because you want to, in my perspective, of course, technical is always important. We don't want to lose that, but it should be influenced by market forces.
Yeah.
Right, it's going to need that to move forward. So yes, that would be good. And then perhaps we could even, Craig, kind of thinking out loud, maybe if we had an analyst that would talk about the telco side, and perhaps if there's resources that Cliff, maybe on the web services side. I'm just kind of throwing that out there as an idea, but maybe that would put a couple stakes in the ground for people to rally around for potential future projects.
Yeah. In fact, maybe we can invite to the workshop or the panel session someone from Google. I kind of know one or two, don't know if I could get them, but we can always ask, right? I would think of Gabriella Di Piazza from Google, who used to be with VMware actually, and just been doing a lot of work on now, I guess, introducing the cloud providers into the telecom network arena. That whole ecosystem is really new and very interesting, and something that I don't know if we want to tackle, but maybe it makes sense for that workshop to have at least a discussion on it.
Yeah, we did get a name, Ratanaj Raja from Google. He was recommended by Don, who was part of our panelists in the November Global Summit. And it was interesting because when Lauren and I were on the call with him, many of the questions that Lauren had, he said, well, that's exactly where we're at. He goes, we're at the point where we're asking the exact same questions that Lauren was asking. So I think they see a lot of different use cases. They're, looking at how does that monetize correctly. And, I would say they see a lot more opportunities, but picking the ones that they're going to fund, they're kind of at that vetting their own. There's a multitude of things that they're looking at, and that they only have so much to invest in it. So it was kind of a interesting discussion to see that they're still at the learning curve stage. It's a big curve, but they're still looking at different ways that they can build out on some of these ideas. The one thing that he did mention, Craig, that I thought was kind of interesting is he was saying if like our group, if there was a way to showcase which applications needed the lowest latency possible with a really good far edge 5G solution. He said that it's not super clear. They know autonomous vehicles, obviously, closer is better, but just in terms of what's the best business case for having the high compute speeds and the low latency at the edge, he was thinking he could pull some people together to try to address which applications would require that versus others that wouldn't be quite as they might be able to consolidate further back in the network just because the latency
Right.
wasn't as tough to meet.
But any kind of computer vision work, maybe something can be good, use case from that angle, because it needs more kind of, if you have a computer vision or image analysis at the edge and making decision out of it with the AI ML engine, so probably that's something that we can look into. A lot of these smart city kind of use cases where you can monitor the parking spaces, and also you monitor like the speed of the cars and others, face detection, those kind of things. So those kind of things are probably a good use case from that angle.
So Craig, I know
Yeah,
you have about
I
the
think there's. Yeah, I'm sorry. I was just going to add to what Tanvir said. Part of what we've always traditionally looked at as the edge, the far edge, has to do with processing latencies. So not, in terms of that, usually you're talking about some kind of round trip time. So, obviously, radio communications or any communications is bounded by the speed of light. And so when you talk about low latency, you're really talking about a distance from some object. And the interesting thing with the smart city initiatives is not necessarily that you need to have low latent connections, but rather there's a hyper locality kind of information that seems to be important. It's not as important that the processing is necessarily done in a time bound fashion, but there's so much amount of information that you want to bound that information by the location. So if you could think of like digital signage or where's a parking space available, that kind of hyper locality thing that doesn't require necessarily the speed of latency processing, but the location of the data, your hyper locality of data. And I think that's a different dimension than we usually look at or have traditionally looked at in terms of far edge.
What I can tell you is in the surveys that I have done in my past life on the drivers for edge computing, the locality of data is equally important as latency.
Right.
In the surveys I've done. So if you're only looking at latency, you're missing half the opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, but in our traditional edge case, and the reason we find ourselves in the telco project in edge rather than just say the general server solution part of edge computing, is that was really part of a disaggregation of services that required a bound of latency and processing turnaround. So like I said, that's always been the driving thing behind our use case of edge that we now typically call the far edge because of the diameter of distance that you can be from, say, that antenna and still be able to do some of the baseband processing that allows you to disaggregate that solution. And you know, we had the same exact same thing with the GPON and the XGPON efforts from AT&T that we were working on in telco. But the disaggregation part of that was a little bit different in terms of the you know, where those resources were. They were typically at the edge of a neighborhood versus, you know, a tower centrally located somewhere. But certainly, I think there are that hyper locality is also a far edge thing, and we've not really explored, with the exception of, you know, our the side of the rail with Rail Baltica was some of that, and then also the retail edge was another place where it wasn't necessarily the latency of the processing, but did have more to do with the locality of the data. So if you imagine, you know, the retail store wanting to keep the inventory for the store locally, so if there was some kind of processing delay going back to like the distribution sites, they would still be able to maintain their you know, inventory
Right.
updates and those kind of things while it was occurring. You know, the communication interruption was occurring. So yeah, I think those are certainly items that we should be looking at, and some use cases that we should, you know, try to drive some. But you know, and as usual though, you know, and I'm always that voice that wants to say, you know, it's fine and dandy to talk about these potential use cases. However, in OCP, what really drives things are adopters. And so we have, you know, a lot of folks who are willing to, you know, propose solutions, to come up with solutions, but without an adopter, you know, it's usually not some, you know, we can all come up with examples of what we think may be use cases that, you know, could potentially be the next big thing. But if we don't have an adopter who's looking for that, it really doesn't do us much good.
Right. And so is part of this workshop going to be to try to attract some adopters to speak and get engaged?
Absolutely.
Is that a goal? In which case, you've got to set it up that way, right? And we have to set it up that way.
Yes. Well, we've already, you know, as we've mentioned several applications, you know, like the railway side, the retail, we've had shipborne, and we've also had mines. And so basically, you know, we need to pull out our Edge Rolodex and actually engage these folks, re-engage the folks who have actually done presentations in the past and on these same topics, and like go, okay, hey, you know, it's been a year since we've had an update on this. What are your current thinking? How have y'all progressed in this?
Right.
You know, so because I think those are the things that usually drive our community, which, you know, by and large is going to be folks who are wanting to make a product, right? And so if they have a customer or, you know, an adopter who's saying, this is a need I have and I would like for it to be solved, and here's an idea I have about solving it, could you help me refine this, or how would you think about this? That's what usually gets projects started, more than, you know, well, we, you know, read our crystal ball and look at the tea leaves and we think this may be a way things are going. You know, I try really hard not to talk about those kinds of personal thoughts of mine or whatever, but, you know, I always want to bring it back to people who have brought topics before our group that aren't necessarily active, you know, and it's kind of like, how do we re-engage those folks that then, you know, and how do we let birds of their feather know that they were engaged and that this is a place where you could engage on those kinds of topics. So I think, you know, I think an analyst community would be a fine thing, provided that's the goal that we have in mind for that analyst, right, is to drive adoption rather than, try to spur innovation or research from our vendor community, right? And that's
This is
go
Wayne
ahead.
here. Sorry, Craig. Yeah,
No worries.
this is Wayne here. I don't know if I've come to this sidebar. I'm uninvited.
Yeah, no. We welcome all.
Thanks. You remember that we talked about sending out a survey to streamline some typical site requirements from the commodity. I think that might help driving the adoption, to collect inputs from the companies in the commodity on what typical requirements, capacity, power, adaptation, to streamline the specs a little bit so that they know that, well, their voice is being heard, and we can also work towards a certain guideline in this group. And I actually started drafting such a survey together with Mike and Howard,
right.
But they both have changed the employer, and that were kind of poor. But I'm happy to pick that up again, just to get the ball rolling.
Well, yeah. Well, we should. And are you? What was the target group for this survey, or was this the same as like a redefinition of the survey that we sent last year, or were we looking to target a different group?
It's a more specific hardware adoption kind of survey. I think it's the survey we did last year was more of use cases and interests or future roadmaps, right? And we were also talking about how to architecture this hardware to adapt to potential users' sites, like what kind of form factors and what kind of power and the access to power utilities, and things like that. And this can be interesting to collect inputs on.
I believe that Jim and Tanvir both would be interested in working with you on that, the same as with Matt, with Mike and Howie. I mean, obviously, I'm more than happy as well, and I know
with them. So yeah, let's maybe try.
Sure.
I can pick up the list I drafted. I can look at it together with Howie and also send to Jim and sorry,
Jim.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so that sounds exciting. Yes, I would really like to work with you on that. And, I think if I can send you my address, I think if you can, I think if you look in the calendar invite, I think it lists my individual email, but if not, I'll send that to you. And sure, if we could have a chance to review that even, this week still or next week, whatever fits your schedule best. I like the idea because we could create a funnel of pulling information from potential adopters, use that to get a little bit more specific on what we would want to do for the workshop. And I think if we have some adopter focused results from the questionnaire, I think, Cliff, that would give you a much better goal to look for analysts that could meet that.
Yep.
Okay.
For sure.
I'll do that. Thanks. I have another question. I'll take the chance to shoot. Yeah. So we talk about collecting use cases, and there will be plenty, I'm sure. But I'm wondering, do we want to target those use cases where the access of the data are via cellular networks? Because most, okay, maybe I'm too arrogant to say most, but many use cases actually access data via WAN or fixed network. And that has not as much to do with typical telco applications. So I'm just wondering if we want to angle this more towards cellular network access. Just
well,
so if I may
go
interject
ahead.
a little bit, so when I did a lot of work and surveying of telecom or communication service providers in my last life, and there was definitely a significant body of work around edge that was using, wire line, not just wireless, and moving compute to the edge still, or even on-prem at the enterprise, but managed by the communication service provider. And I just worry if this group wanted to limit to cellular, there'd be a lot of edge computing that wouldn't be covered. Anyhow, I just want to put that out there. As part of the OCP Foundation, I would want that to be covered somewhere. And I don't, if this isn't the group, that's okay. But I just wanted to put that out there.
Well, actually, I was going to say that in terms of this group's focus, it has traditionally been the cellular type communication. The telco group, on the other hand, has, like I said, with the GPON networks and the disaggregated router, there was a lot of interest in and more applicability to data storage in telco rather than in the edge. And in the edge project, we focused more on, at one point we looked to have a storage sled produced for the open edge server to give it a little bit more storage, although that effort was kind of overcome and changed by NVMe. So now that we have NVMe with the new form factors, the density of data for the edge, far edge, seems to be met there best. However, on the telco side, we continue to look at things like CDNs and edge CDN boxes that would go into those, like the neighborhood exchange box where the GPON equipment would sit, so that you would have caching of data that would occur there, and even a hierarchical caching of data from the larger data centers towards the regionals down into the edge, which would be kind of like the neighborhood edge, because at each of those locations, the content would tend to get more and more focused for groups, so that. But yeah, that's certainly I like that whole concept, and I think that certainly fits, and especially on the because we are telcos at the end of the day, and we're not in the storage group, and our charter is really to take those data center products that the storage group would come up with, that the server groups come up with, the rack and power, and then to find ways that those can be modified so that they're suitable for telco use cases rather than data center use cases, because we found that things like NEBS requirements, DC power requirements, those things are somewhat unique to telcos, and if we actually want to take the OCP, wider OCP infrastructures and move those into the telco, there are certain aspects that need to be addressed, and that's typically what we've been addressing in both the telco and then obviously into the edge project as well, right? So, but yeah, I think, you know, all of that data, and again, like I said, I think the hyperlocality of data even on the far edge is very important, but even larger amounts of data, and, you know, like I said, typically those were talked about in terms of CDNs when we were, you know, talking about the telco side, which there may be another application for the far edge that's similar to the CDN use case that we were seeing in the wireline side of the equation.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But, you know, I'm like I said, I'm open for anything. I'm just I'm more interested in the adopter side of the thing. So, you know, AT&T was a great partner of the telco and the edge projects from that standpoint, because you know, they were able to articulate from an adopter standpoint what was being looked for, and, you know, historically, right, we've had both Verizon, Orange, Deutsche Telekom, South Korea Telecom have all been group, or, you know, organizations that have been in the adopter you know, voice, and have always, you know, given those kinds of, and we need to attract new adopters, that as the market has changed, and also to reach out to these other guys and see if perhaps, you know, they're you know, usually what happens is you have some kind of a business shift within that, in the organization, and because they're such large organizations, it would be, you know, different pieces of the organization, which now we may find that we just need to reach into a different part of the organization that would be interested in talking and you know,
So you're saying
engaging with our community.
Go back to some of those organizations that have been involved in the past and see if there's a new contact and see if we can get them engaged for the workshop.
Exactly, because I know even though the business, you know, the individual business units may have been reorganized, and the people that were working on the projects are no longer working on them, but we never got the new folks that are, obviously they're still working in that area, but the new people never engaged with the community. And so it's kind of, you know, we should probably reach back out to the organizations and see if we can't find those people in those organizations that are, you know, would be interested in re-engaging.
So how would we do that? I guess we'd have to generate some sort of list and then kind of go at
Yeah,
that.
well, yeah, I mean, I think we have, you know, I have a email, you know, extensive OCP email from, you know, many years now that, you know, it's kind of like, oh yeah, who was that guy? And type in, you know, a few searches on my OCP email, and, you know, it pops out, you know, emails that were exchanged in the past. And then, you know, I think Jim and I have tried that in one case. It took a little while for us to get some, you know, contact back, but and we haven't actually been able to you know, nail that one down yet, but it did at least get some new contact made and some communications flowing again.
Yeah, so I think there's kind of a contact review is one
Right.
piece. I think the survey kind of goes hand in hand with that, because we could try to make it a little bit more targeted for people who previously had participated. kind of a joint mini project on that.
Yeah.
And then
Now, I do have one question. Sorry, Jim. Which comes from, so it seems like, if I'm understanding this group, it's one of the first calls I'm actually coming to on this group, equipment that you're interested in adopters that would be telecom providers, because they would buy equipment to go on their prem. So the retail use case isn't of interest to this group, by a logical extension, because that equipment's just standard IT equipment. Well, it may not be standard IT equipment, but it's IT. It's going to be bought by typically an enterprise or the retail outlet and put on prem. It's not going to be bought through a telecom provider.
Right, but they were attracted to the Edge project because our shepherding in the Edge project is the Open Edge platform. And so those retailers found the Open Edge platform something that they thought would be useful because of its form factor for their use case, right?
Okay.
So they were seeing, yep, today we're using pizza box servers. They take up this much space. Our closet space is limited in our in our Edge offices or our retail locations, and we think this would be a way to get a better utilization from a space standpoint.
Okay.
So then it became what would you like? We had to make some assumptions for telco use cases so that we have the ability to have front or rear cooling. Do you still need that, or would you want something different? What kind of servers would you like? We standardized on single CPU servers to do away with the NUMA issues of having multiple CPUs where, you're obviously using a 2-socket system in a pizza box today. Would you be interested in that kind of form factor? Right. And so those were the kinds of issues that we were looking to address, even looking at, hey, if we were to broaden this, what would be a new form factor for the Open Edge? Would we want to keep that, or would we want to change it? What would version 2 look like?
So why did it break down then? Why did it stop? It doesn't seem to have gone. So what stopped it?
In the retail case, the adopter decided that they needed to go back to their central data centers and their distribution data centers before they went to the Edge. And so they're still interested. There's still, there's discussions going on. However, they're not at the point where they're interested in producing any specifications for Edge equipment, because they're now focused back on, we really need to get our larger data centers under control, because that may be a bigger bang for our buck, because we need to, that's the recycle that we need to refresh right now, or it's more important for us to refresh that.
Okay.
And so we're like, okay, well, that's great. We're here, we're ready. And now the Railway Baltica, on the other hand, I'm not exactly sure what has happened to them, other than, I just don't know how that project is doing. It was part of a larger EU effort on an EU transportation project, and the Railway Baltica was the first piece of that. And we really need to, go back and re-engage with them and find out where they are, right?
Okay.
And a lot of the stuff we have, our meetings, and we kind of expect folks to show back up, right? And they just haven't cycled back through right now.
Okay.
And we understand, because of or at least from my standpoint, because we deal with the communication providers. I understand where they're at in terms of their rollout plans. So they're, before things were in the lab, things are now moving on to POCs. We're now having some actual network deployments. Those are now going to start going into wide scale deployment. When that occurs, we expect to now have a refresh of specifications coming back through of, okay, here's what we need met now as we're deploying these, what we need for wide scale deployment. And so we kind of, for those guys, I'm kind of like, well, they're in a lull right now, just not because they're not interested in it by any means, right? It's just not in the part of their cycle where, I think we're going to start seeing a lot of operational kind of concerns that I believe is going to be coming back from that group.
Right.
Right.
Typical progress, typical
right.
process.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Now,
I'm sorry.
Before we go, Cliff, before I have to go, what is your schedule like for the rest of the week? If I set up a meeting in your AM, are you typically free in that time frame? Like 7 or 8 o'clock your time?
7 or 8 o'clock a.m.
AM, yeah, early meetings.
I can.
Or do you have?
No, right now 7. Tomorrow I have dentist, so I can't. But Thursday and Friday.
Yeah. But
Thursday and Friday is good, and normally I'm at my desk by 7:30 in the morning. So it's usually it's my quiet work time, so I'm happy to chat with you then.
Yeah. Okay, great. Well, I'm wanting to set up a meeting. I was wanting to set up a meeting with you, and the folks are in Europe, and so I was kind of like, well, I need to make sure you're going to be okay before I start spinning up folks. I'm trying to get their times, but
And just to confirm, I'm not Central, I'm Eastern time zone, okay?
Oh yeah, that's even better, right?
Okay.
Yeah, that's an hour earlier for me.
That's right. It's an hour earlier for you. So, but that's okay.
No
let me know. We can do it.
Sure.
Okay.
Great.
Take care. Thanks.
Thank you.
Happy to help with the workshop any way I can, by the way.
Appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you, Cliff.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.